Hello readers, I'm Amy and it's time for a standalone review. I have here We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Barry. I love this cover. It's very 80s. The color and style of the 80s is something that just really appeals to me. This book, where do I start? I guess I should start by saying I can't rate this book, which isn't usually something that I would say. Like, I rate fiction, I rate nonfiction, I put a rating on everything that I read. But I just don't feel like I can rate this for a couple of different reasons, which I'll explain throughout the review. But basically, to start you off, the author, Quan Barry, is from Danvers, Massachusetts, which is where the Salem witch trials initially took place, and then that area split off from Salem and became Danvers. There's a map, it kind of explains it. On the back cover, we have an actual picture of the author in marching band while in Danvers as a kid in 1978, and this book takes place in 1989. So we are following some girls from the class of 1990 throughout the first half of their senior year. It feels like you're following them throughout a whole school year of their lives, but it's really only end of summer to December that this book takes place. And these girls are all part of the field hockey team. It also includes boy Corey. So there's boy Corey and girl Corey. They're both named Corey. One is a boy, one is a girl. And boy Corey is also part of this team. His parents weren't super impressed when he joined a team of all girls, and they're kind of trying to ignore it. And right there you see a huge theme with this book of queer diversity. I loved that. It was one of those books that included diversity without making it seem like the author was trying too hard. This is very much a coming-of-age book, and with all of the characters that you're following, it's like you're seeing them develop as people. They're learning about their gender, they're learning about their sexuality, they're learning about their self-expression, they're experimenting like teenagers do, and we pretend that they don't. And I loved that, and it was super relatable for me to read that. One thing that annoyed me, though, specifically with the characters, is that the author always used their full names, not necessarily their middle name, but you could never just call Abby Abby. It was Abby Putnam did this, Abby Putnam said that, Abby Putnam was thinking this thing. It could never just be Abby. That was how it was with all of the characters. You had to have their full names. And that kind of drove me a little nuts, but there were enough characters that it did actually kind of help with remembering them. But anyways, I should probably actually tell you the plot of this book. All of these girls and boy Corey are on the field hockey team, and they are on a very, very bad team that loses constantly. Their best game was 2-8 with them losing. And somehow or other they get wrapped up in this idea of witchcraft and signing their names into the devil's book that they create and doing these acts that are supposed to help them achieve success in their future games. They have parts of a tube sock that were ripped off and tied around their arms to kind of combine them as a group. They start being able to sort of read each other's minds to an extent. And each chapter is named after one of their games. So you have a chapter that's Danvers versus Salem. You have a chapter that's Danvers versus Greenfield. And so in each chapter, one of the games takes place, and you're watching them as they start to succeed. And you're like, is this actually witchcraft? Are they just having a really great team dynamic? What's really going on? And it's not super plot heavy. That's kind of it for the plot of this book, but the character building is really awesome. I think the way the character building was done in this book is a little bit staggered, which I'm not sure I liked. So you would learn about someone's background and go through the present part of the story, and then a couple of chapters later you would start with someone else's background, and even by the end of the book I was still learning something completely new about a character. So it's kind of hard to explain unless you read it yourself, but that kind of staggered starting knowledge on the characters wasn't my favorite. but I felt invested in each of these characters. I liked following them along. Their arcs, their story arcs individually made sense and as a group made sense. The book does end with a chapter kind of discussing their lives as adults, and I'm gonna have a tiny little itty bitty spoiler here, because I think it's important for those of us that get annoyed by stuff like this to know that this book is not that. Everyone knows you have all of those books that end. Everyone's married and has kids and has their perfect nuclear heterosexual cisgender family. And I just want you to know that this book does not end that way. Of all of the endings in this book, I think there's only one person that ended up in a nuclear style family, and there were like 11 players on this team. So that was awesome. Again, the diversity is just kind of effortless in this book, which I loved. It's just this coming of age, diverse, like women in sports story, and I loved it. I don't know how to rate it because I guess the reason that I can't really rate it is the length and kind of the way the story was told. Like, I don't think this book is going to appeal to a ton of people, in that it was, what, 300 and some pages? This book is 360 pages, and with all of the extras put in here and all of the time put in here, I feel like this 360 pages could have made a very successful 160 pages. Which is why I don't want to rate it. Like, I really enjoyed it every step of the way. I binged this book. I was here for every moment of it, and I loved it. But also, there wasn't necessarily a lot that happened, and I think it would have been a lot more interesting had 2/3 of it been cut. But I still enjoyed it. And I'm like, I feel like it's a 5-star book. But the length of it and the repetition of the characters' full names and the staggering of the character background makes me feel more like it was a 3-star. So this is going to be the first book, I think, in years that I have not been able to put a rating to, but I think that's okay. So there is an element to this book that I forgot to mention, because even when I write notes, I forget to mention something. This book obviously is quite feminist in its discussion, but it does a lot of kind of feminist examination of race and culture and diversity in the 80s and society, and there's just all these really awesome examinations. And one of the kind of, not really side plots, but side discussions is that one of the black main characters really, really hates the novel Huckleberry Finn. And they don't dive a lot into why, like I'm sure that's the kind of research you can do on your own. But she's so angered by the fact that senior class has to read this book every single year, and she hates it so much. And there's this kind of discussion of like, what we're teaching in schools is problematic, and the way we talk about race or don't talk about race in schools is problematic. There are, I believe, 2 main characters who are Asian, and it also talks about like how they're different, how they're similar, how the way that they approach race is different from the way that the black character approaches race. So that was just a really neat addition, and I'm really thankful that this book had that conversation. So that is going to be it from me. If you have any questions on this book, please go ahead and leave it in the comments down below. Have a conversation with me about this book. Have you read it? Have you not? Are you interested in it? Do you want some more details on it? Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media. I will see all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.